Good evening and welcome to the Sunshine meeting of the Terre Haute City Council. It is 6:03 on Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. Roll call, Michelle, please.
Councilwoman Aller.
Present.
Councilman Azar.
Present.
Councilwoman Crossan.
Present.
Councilman Devon.
Here.
Councilman Elliott. Councilman Garrison.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Nasser.
Present.
Councilman Nation.
Here.
8 are present, 1 is absent.
Okay, this is our Sunshine meeting. We are basically going to be, no votes will take place this evening. We'll just be doing some fact gathering and question and answering. If you've never been to our council before, our agendas are up here on the first pew. If you're here to speak on anything that is not on our agenda, you will have that time next week where we allocate 30 minutes for public comment. First order of business, Michelle, please.
General Ordinance 7, 2017, amending City Code, Chapter 2, Article 9, Section 2-117, Police Pension Fund. This was previously tabled.
Petitioner to speak on this, please.
Council, Eddie Felling, City Attorney. As you recall from last month, we drafted this piece to amend the city code to add some additional language clarifying which part of the Indiana Code governs the use of the 1925 Police Pension Fund. Excuse me. Since that time, I've met with Mr. Gamble, who's helping assist with those pensioners regarding this issue. We've shared a lot of financial information at this point. We're still working towards a resolution, which we do not have firmed up at this juncture. We're still hoping for something to have the council prior to our next meeting as far as any proposed amendments. I would still ask that what is in front of the council is still essential to have passed with regard to offering at least a red flag to future administrations with regard to the use of that fund. But if there is additional proposed language that the administration and the pensioners can agree on, we'll be happy to present that to the council. Be happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on General Ordinance 7, 2017? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Noah Gamble. I'm an attorney with Wagner, Crawford, Gamble, and Jungers. I represent some of the 1925 pensioners. I have in front of you, and I've just given it to Mr. Felling, the city attorney, a proposed amendment that we have worked on with regard to the 1925 Police Pension Fund. Pursuant to statute, which is the city is required to follow, we believe that the language of the statute means that it would be in the best interest of the city in following that law that the police pension fund be segregated from the general fund and not commingled. Pursuant to law, the fund is only for the exclusive benefit of the 1925 pensioners, that commingling that fund with the general fund potentially could violate the statute. In our opinion, it does. And so in the best interest of the city, we think that to protect the city and to protect the pensioners, that those monies be segregated from the general fund. The idea that we thought of that it's a work in progress, we're working with the city attorney to think outside the box on how to do that, would be to create its own account and then put in property tax disbursements into that account as they come in. When state reimbursements would go back to the general fund, that being that it would be monies taken away from the general fund and put into a segregated account. That way it would protect those pensioners' monies, and that on a rolling basis, calculating that amount from the previous total personnel benefits paid. It may not be the best fix, and it's a work in progress, but at least at this point, we'd like the City Council to consider that. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I was going to ask you your thoughts on this. I know you just received it.
I did just receive this proposal, and obviously I'll continue to look into this as well as running this through the controller's office for their thoughts as well. Just one thing, I don't want to get in too in-depth at this juncture because I don't have firm numbers in front of me, but one problem we have to consider as we look at these proposals is that the 25 pension fund is pretty heavily subsidized by property tax dollars. So these aren't actual pension monies that were set aside or even reimbursements that were set aside. Our general fund, again, property tax money is heavily subsidizing this fund, which causes some logistical issues with regard to just setting up a new account. And that subsidy is in the tune of millions of dollars at this point. So that's why we really have to get down to the nitty-gritty on this to try and figure out something that's going to be acceptable for all the parties. And I'll be happy to provide an update on the financial status of that, hopefully here at our next meeting.
Noah, if there isn't an agreement with regards to an amendment with the administration, what would be your client's next recourse of action?
The next recourse of action would be essentially, it would be up to the city council to decide what they want to do, regardless of what the administration would like to do. Honestly, Mr. Felling and I have really busted our heads together to think outside the box on how to do this to make both parties happy, both groups of entities. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but my client's position on this is that those monies need to be protected to make sure that there are funds available for police pensioners, beneficiaries, and widows and there's approximately 80 beneficiaries for that 1925 pension fund. It runs the risk if it's commingled with the general fund, that those monies are not being apportioned appropriately. So ultimately, we would leave that up to the city council to decide what would be the best way to do that if we can't find an agreement.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public that'd like to speak on General Ordinance 7, 2017? Council? Councilman Garrison?
Do either of you know what our approximate payout is per year?
Mr. Felling has shared numbers with me, rough, that I have used to rely on. I know that in 2016, the total personnel benefits, and if you want to chime in, that's fine too, is 2016, it was $2.3 million on an annual basis, and that's $2,312,194 in 2016. 2015 was $2,356,127. 2014, $2,414,616. We've got the city has provided us numbers going back to 2004. As you know, the law changed in 2008, so that fluctuates. I guess what we're trying to say is that that once those property tax monies come in, again, take a portion of that, which would be approximately $1 million, and set it aside so that there'd be a guarantee for my clients that those monies are protected.
Thank you. And then, are there monies that is pooled maybe that hasn't made it back into the account yet? Are you talking about those funds as well, or are you just? It sounds like we're just talking about going forward.
Right now, Mr. Felling and I have been talking about going forward. We're still working on the numbers with regard to what monies may need to be paid back, but if any. But for right now, I think the more pressing matter that we've been working on and trying to resolve is the best way to protect that fund on behalf of those beneficiaries.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Rowland?
So, I don't know whoever wants to answer here, but before our next meeting next week, are we going to work on an amendment, or do you want us to table this till we get an amendment? I know we have a proposed amendment in front of us.
Mr. Gamble, I think we're fairly close on the same page on this issue. Obviously, I want everybody to come together and offer something to the council where there aren't opposing sides. I know Mr. Gamble wants that as well. I want the council to feel comfortable. I want the pensioners to feel comfortable. So if we can agree on something, we will absolutely bring that amendment. If we can't reach it, I've already talked to Mr. Gamble. We will table it, withdraw it, whatever we have to do. But I promise the council if we don't get it done next week, we'll get it done next month, or the next month, or the next month. So we will get somewhere, and I'm confident we can reach a point where we all agree on something.
I'd rather just see it, have the amendment before us or table versus pass something and have to go back and
And
re-amend.
we can try and get that amendment together. No one likes to have something handed to them the night of and not have an ability to really
Okay.
chew on what's in front of them. So we'll try and give the council plenty of advance notice.
Thank you. I know.
And I'll just add that the amendment that we have drafted is to give not only the council, but the city attorney, the idea of where we're coming from, but obviously, if there are other ideas, thinking outside the box in order to assist my clients, we're all ears.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business, Michelle, please.
General Ordinance 8, 2017, amending City Code, Chapter 9, Article 5, Section 9-112, leak adjustments.
Council,
Speak on this, please.
thank you. City Attorney Eddie Felling, I want to do my best to try and explain what looks to be a very simple addition that can be somewhat confusing. In short, I've worked with not only the Sanitary Commission, but also Mr. Spidel and some concerned citizens with regard to sewer leaks and the adjustment procedure that we have in place for those individuals that have extremely high sewer bills that may have had something to do, with a leak in the yard, whatever it may be, putting together some form of a process to allow some relief to those individuals. In a nutshell, the way the process works currently is that a sewer leak adjustment is given for one single month, and generally that correlates directly with how the water company would award some form of a water leak adjustment as well. That's the basic premise. What this ordinance does that's in front of you today would allow us to not only keep the 1 month leak adjustment, but go into a second month as well. And it would be a contiguous month, so you'd have whatever the highest month is that you're asking for the leak adjustment, but you'd also get either the month immediately preceding or succeeding that month to get an additional adjustment. I firmly believe that this would allow for any really responsible homeowner that's paying attention to their bills, give them the relief they need on those bills. What it will not help is someone that doesn't pay attention to their bills, doesn't pay them timely, has them taken directly out of their accounts and doesn't pay attention to what those amounts are. It won't provide that relief because we're seeing a lot of people with multiple months, 3, 4, 5 months, where you have skyrocketed amounts. If you don't catch it until that point, there has to be we have to get to some point where there's a homeowner's responsibility to keep an eye on those. So what this does, again, allows for an additional month of rebate, and it can be extremely high and extremely beneficial for those users.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on General Ordinance 8, 2017?
My name is Donald Wayne Hyde. I live at 1411 Poplar Street, and I've owned that property for a number of years, and I would want to cross the street. What's not being pointed out here is a little problem that has become a huge problem, and as time goes by, it's going to be even a bigger problem. Not just for me, but for every single person in the entire city. Here's the problem. When you put in the sewer lines, you buried them under the streets. And under one street means something to me big time, because it was a highway way back in the day. It had a lot of traffic. And until 1964, semis constantly rolled over it. And it packed down the street. Well, you pack down the street, it put pressures on those pipes. And a lot of the sewer lines from 25th to 2nd Street on Poplar Street were broken or badly damaged. Now, let's come forward 50 years to 1980. Now, in 1980, all of a sudden, the city of Terre Haute, not just the highways, but all the streets, we began to repair them. We began to drill holes down. And when you drill holes down into the streets where your sewer lines are, guess what? You mess up the sewer lines occasionally. Not all the time, occasionally. And then you weaken the street, little potholes, cars are going over it all the time, and it, again, puts pressure on those sewer lines. Bottom line is, when they put the sewer lines, not under the sidewalks, but under the streets, they made a huge mistake that is going to come back eventually on the city. So no, I disagree that the problem lies with the public who bought homes, after the sewer lines were put there 100 years earlier, 50 years earlier. It's like buying I don't know, there's a reason for it, and I'm sure you understand it. But the bottom line is, the word fair has to be taken into consideration, and I tell you right now, you're nowhere near fair, and the problem is only going to get worse. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to speak on General Ordinance 8, 2017? Council? Next order of business, Michelle, please.
Appropriation for 2017, $85,851.53 from EMS non-reverting number 0270 to Training Academy number 0511.
Mr. President, members of council, Jeff Fisher, Fire Chief. This is our one of two transfers from the EMS to training, 5%. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on appropriation for 2017? Council? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Next order of business, please.
Appropriation 5, 2017, $392,351.64 from edit number 0404 to Margaret Avenue Quarter number 450521.
Welcome.
Mr. President, members of council, Chuck Ennis, city engineer. This is appropriation into our Margaret Avenue line. This reflects a payment that Indiana American made to the city for us taking responsibility, or our contractor taking responsibility for the installation of the water lines on the Margaret Avenue project. So they've paid us, we're doing the project. We just need to move this back into the Margaret line so we can spend it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anyone from the public that'd like to speak on appropriation 5, 2017? Council?
Mr. President.
Councilman Nation?
Chuck, as long as we're talking about Margaret Avenue, can you give us a little update on how it's going?
It's going according to schedule. The closure of 25th and Margaret was a bit of an issue, but it's opened back up again. The contractor is working with us to keep that intersection open as much as possible. That was for the installation of some sewer lines and some storm sewers, why that intersection was closed. But like I said, it's back open again and should be open until at least next spring, at least the intersection. The work back at the overpass and the bridge itself will start here in earnest probably next month. And the remainder of the road will be closed until probably about October of next year. And then when it opens back up again, we'll be driving on it. So,
When it reopens, will it be substantially complete enough to provide parallel relief to I-70?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And-
We're not encouraging that parallel relief. I know some of the local people will take that as an alternate. The traffic accidents we have on I-70, we had 2 of them yesterday. We need the bridge at Highway 40. We need the bridges out here to complete a real alternate route. Margaret Avenue doesn't have that, but it would be an alternate route eventually from 41 to 46, but it's not a complete alternate because of the bridge.
Okay.
Anyway, I just throw that out there.
Well, the reason I ask is it's always been my understanding that when we establish it as something that Margaret Avenue is something that can be parallel relief to I-70, that we can route truck traffic from I-70 onto that instead of bringing it into the city through downtown. And then
Right.
over those
We
bridges.
could if there were an accident between 41 and 46.
Right.
But anything outside of that, we try to encourage them to take the old 40 route.
Okay, thanks, I yield.
Councilman Garrison.
Yeah, Chuck, I was just, since we're moving money out of the edit account, I was curious if you might know what the approximate value or the balance is after this move.
The edit?
Mhm.
No, I don't, but I can get it to you by next week.
Okay, thanks.
Councilwoman Aller.
The money that the American Water had repaid us back, is that for the overpass project, or was that for
Yes.
another piece of Margaret Avenue?
No, that's for this leg of Margaret.
I yield.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Next order of business, please.
Special ordinance 28, 2017, rezoning a property located at 1120 Beach Street, favorable with conditions. Recommendation from area planning.
Will petitioner speak on this, please?
Good evening, Mr. President, fellow members of council. My name is Richard Shagley. I'm an attorney at the Wright, Shagley and Lowry. Tonight, I'm before you representing the petitioner, Flyer Properties LLC. They own this property, and they lease it to a company by the name of Keymark Development, who Flyer also owned the property across the street, which is where Keymark's corporate headquarters are. This lot's intended use is for storage of some material and some equipment. There was a home on there. A little history about this home. In 2006, it was sold for $59,000. Recently, it was purchased for $8,000. This home was condemned. It was not a fan of the neighborhood. Flyer Properties bought this property, removed the home, cleaned up the lot, and they're currently using it for storage of the materials. They're asking that this property it's currently zoned R2. They're asking it to be rezoned to R2 plan development. This is for the use of the storage. As mentioned, this did get favorable recommendation last night at area plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on special ordinance 28, 2017? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Quick question for all the stupid people. My name is Donald Wayne Hyde. I have a question for the man. He mentions they're going to use it for storage. He hasn't told us what kind of storage. I'd like to know that personally. Thank you.
Although I appreciate it, I don't consider myself a dumb man. But this property is being leased to Keymark Development. They're keeping backhoes, storage trailers, some materials on the property. It's been all gravelled, fenced, and there's pine trees that have been planted as a buffer to the community. Oh, thank you. During this notice process, we received no complaints or concerns. One neighbor I have spoken to did not oppose this, and he happens to also work in the area plan office. So it received a favorable staff report as well as a favorable recommendation from the area plan commission.
Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to speak on special ordinance 28, 2017? Council? Next order of business, Michelle, please.
Thank you.
Resolution 12, 2017, transfer of $16,000 in the EMS non-reverting fund, number 0270, budget.
Welcome.
Mr. President, members of council, Jeff Fisher, Fire Chief. This is transferring money around in my EMS non-reverting for the purchase of 2 vehicles. I was short in one line item. This is just transferring money over to complete that line item. Be more than happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on resolution 12, 2017? Council?
Mr. President?
Councilwoman
What are the
Crossen?
vehicles?
2 pickup trucks. Yeah, one for the maintenance.
Are they replacing?
Yes, replacing 2 vehicles, one for maintenance and the other one for training.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business, Michelle, please.
Resolution 13, 2017, transfer of $140,000 in the CCD fund, number 0402.
Welcome.
Mr. President, members of the council, Chuck Ennis, city engineer. This transfer of budgeted funds is going from services contractual to purchase of equipment. It was for some IT equipment. Brad Spidell tells me it's for servers and storage in City Hall and in the police department, replacing some 6-year-old equipment. Happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on Resolution 13, 2017? Council? Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Next order of business, please.
Resolution 16, 2017, supporting the placement of Terre Haute City Hall on the National Register of Historic Places.
Well, petitioner to speak on this, please.
Hi, Mr. President, members of council. Thank you for having me. I'm here to speak on behalf of Indiana Landmarks
Could
and
you state your name?
Chris Osler, Community Preservation Specialist with Indiana Landmarks. I'm here on behalf of Indiana Landmarks and Terre Haute Landmarks. And I'm here to ask for your support and endorsement of the National Register nomination of the Terre Haute City Hall. I'm here to answer any questions or address any concerns you have about the National Register of Historic Places.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on Resolution 16, 2017? Council?
Mr. President?
Councilwoman Crossen?
Chris, could you, I've had some conversations, I think, with you and with Tommy about any obligations as places in the city or anything like that. Could you just speak to that briefly?
Any obligations?
Uh-huh.
Well, the National Register is a program of the National Park Service, and its purpose is purely honorific. Its purpose is to recognize those buildings worthy of preservation. There are no restrictions. It's purely an honorific program. The limitation that does exist is Section 106 review, which is triggered should any undertaking require federal funding, and that if that undertaking should alter the building in any way, that would trigger Section 106. But other than that, there are no restrictions, no property restrictions at all.
And it's also my understanding that it isn't required that we give our support, but because it is a public building, we like to have
Yes,
public
that's
in
great.
favor of
Because
that.
it is a public building, it does not require the authorization or approval of City Council, but I'm here just to ask for your support and endorsement.
And just one more thing. It's my understanding that the courthouse across the lawn here is already on this registry.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Yes, sir.
If I may make one quick comment. Just an interesting side note is my understanding that Ray Park will be entering or becoming part of the National Registry as well, and they'll be accepting that award or placement on the registry.
It's already been officially accepted.
Okay. There may be some sort of a ceremony or something at the state fair, was my understanding. So that if that's already happened,
Right.
it's already happened. But Ray Park just made it on the list as well, so I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Councilman Nation?
Chris, are there any funding mechanisms or any other incentives that National Register listing would make available to the city?
Yes,
If we decide to improve this property?
Yes, a big one is National Register listing would automatically qualify the City Hall for the Historic Preservation Fund. It would also strengthen fundraising efforts as well. So the Historic Preservation Fund is the big one that it would qualify for.
Is that a state or local incentive?
It's a federal.
A federal or state?
Federal grant. It's a dollar-for-dollar matching, and I believe it's up to $50,000.
Okay. To my fellow council members, this is a step that's long overdue. This should have been done decades ago. I'm really glad that Indiana Landmarks and Terre Haute Landmarks have gotten together and brought this to us, and I welcome your participation in the process, Chris. Thanks for coming and representing it.
Thank you.
All right. Next order of business, Michelle, please.
Resolution 17, 2017, designating an area commonly identified as 1450 Wabash Avenue, 1451 Eagle Street, Terre Haute, Indiana, as the economic revitalization area for the purpose of a 9-year real property tax abatement. Miller Parrott Loss LP. This is for adoption, and our lovely city attorney is handing out proposed amendments.
Petitioner to speak on this, please.
Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Lou Britton. I'm representing the petitioner, Miller Parrott Loss. This project is a cooperative venture of the Sisters of Providence and Flaherty and Collins. Also here this evening is Drew Rosenberger from Flaherty and Collins, and Sister Lisa Stallings and Sister Jenny Howard. Some of you may wonder about the name Miller Parrott Loss. I suspect that there are a couple of councilmen who know to what that refers, but many of you may not. Miller Parrott was the bakery operation that operated out of that building for many, many years. It's approximately 100 years old. It was acquired by the Lighthouse Mission in 1990. The petitioner is requesting a 9-year real property abatement based upon the scoring matrix that the city has in order to convert this property into multifamily housing and office space. As you know, the building itself recently suffered a significant fire loss, and the petitioner is proposing an historically sensitive rehabilitation of the structure. They ultimately will be seeking historic preservation tax credits for the project. If any of you have ever been through that process, as have we when we redid our office building, the Parks Service is very particular about what you do to buildings when you go through that process, so you can be assured that you'll have that additional check on what kind of a renovation is done for this building. They proposed 54 units, residential units for low to moderate income elderly, and 11,000 square feet of general office space. It's intended that the office space will be used by social service organizations who will, at least in part, serve residents of the building. Of those 54 units, 42 would be one bedroom, and 12 would be 2-bedroom. The project cost is estimated at $8.9 million for construction and total development costs of $11.7 million. The job creation is 2 additional full-time jobs. This is obviously not a large employer, but an $8.9 million construction budget will obviously generate a lot of construction jobs, at least during that period of time. The petitioner intends to apply for rental housing tax credit funding through the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, as well as the historic preservation tax credits. That is part of the reason for the delay in the anticipated start date of this project. Those credits will be formally awarded at the end of February 2018. At that point, they can begin their application for historic tax credits, which is another 3 to 4 months. So and then they've got to build in their final planning and start construction. So hopefully they will be under construction by early 19. The project will include amenities such as an on-site community room, a computer center, fitness room, kitchenette, on-site services for wellness checks, financial education, resident counseling, music ministries, and holiday events. The petitioner also anticipates that it will partner with the Area 7 Agency on Aging for transportation services and have been speaking with them about that subject. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. If there are questions I can't answer, I'm sure that someone here can. I do want to share with you these photos. These are not of this particular project, but this is a project that Flaherty and Collins did in Sims at the high school down there that is called Clark's Crossing. I'm told they were more worried about preserving the gym than about preserving the building, which is not surprising. It is Indiana. But that's the building, this is a unit in a low-income elderly project that's done by Clarity and Collins, an interior view of that unit.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. Sorry. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on Resolution 17, 2017? Welcome again.
Donald Hyde, and I'll keep this one short. I have said before to the school board, city council, that one of the things that this town has done in the last 20 years is the underlying safety net is starting to ravel and come apart and get lower and lower. I fully support this, because this is the opposite of the safety net coming apart. It's being restructured, at least in some area in this county, and it's long overdue. I fully support this. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to speak on Resolution 17, 2017? Council?
I'm sorry.
We haven't heard from you yet.
Okay.
Councilman Azar.
Is that building on the tax roll now?
It is not. The assessed value of that building is approximately $1.5 million. This is since they're applying for tax credits and abatement, it will become taxable. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going through that exercise. So upon that property coming on the tax rolls, there will be, that $1.5 million will suddenly become realizable for tax purposes. And it is not abated. The current assessed value is not abated. It's only the increase in assessed value as a result of these improvements. So if you look at the calculation in the matrix for the effect of this abatement, I did some rough numbers, and if Earl was here, he might be able to double check how I did this, but there is a website where you can plug in these numbers and come and generate the figures that are in your packet for the amount of the abatement. It shows over the 9 years a total of abatement of about $1 million. I tried to go into that same site today and find out what the amount of tax would be on $1.5 million over the 9 years, and it gave me an annual number of $668. And I looked at they've changed the rate that they use to calculate since I produced the spreadsheet that I gave you. So at a loss as to how to come up with anything else that would take into account the circuit breaker, because they didn't want to just come up with a raw number without accounting for circuit breaker. I calculated that $400,000 tax over the 9-year period by taking the estimated the 9.8 million, figuring out what percentage of that 1.4 was, and then multiplying the total taxes that would be paid on 9.8 by 0.16, which gave me $400,000. So that is my best estimate. I'm revealing my methodology. If there are flaws in that, I'll be happy to discuss them. But it appears to me that the net tax change would be about $600,000.
Councilwoman Owen?
When you said they were going to file for tax credits.
It's income tax credits, state income tax credits.
So nothing on the property tax?
Well, that's the abatement. The abatement piece is,
So you're just going to...
that's the only property tax.
And the property will be assessed as true market value, not income approach?
I don't know the answer to that. That's down the road how they will do the assessment, but I would assume that they will. I mean, currently, it's assessed
True market.
at true market at $1.5 million.
Usually you do go the income approach? So, okay. Because I know I talked to the auditor's office just to get a rough estimate. That's sitting at the assessment that it is now, I think it would generate like $42,000 a year in taxes.
fairly close to what I came up with.
Give or
I feel
take.
good.
Yeah, you're pretty good. But that's with true market value.
Correct.
So with income, that gives a credit, and then we give the abatement on top of that.
Well, you have to keep in mind that if the total assessment gets reduced, the total dollars abated are reduced also, because the abatement is just a percentage of the tax.
Right, but you're still getting 2 credits.
Now, they get one, they get the tax, there's the tax abatement, but the credit that I mentioned is the funding they're seeking through the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, which
Right.
is an income tax credit, not a property tax credit.
Right, but I'm talking if you get the income approach and then we give an abatement on top of that. That's why I'm asking if it's true value or if it's income approach.
The income approach is simply a different way to calculate the assessed value.
I understand.
Then you apply the abatement to whatever that
To-
number is.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that could cut that true market value in half. Income approach could.
I don't want to speculate about what it might or might not do to the value. That's a complicated formula that I've never been able to figure out. It certainly didn't cut my taxes by half on the property I own.
And it might not be half, but I mean, it takes,
It cut it by about 15% on
Yeah.
a rental property that I own, so.
and sometimes the older properties, it gives a little bit more.
It's really old, so,
I know.
I mean, the house I'm talking about that they did the income approach on.
Councilman Nation.
First, I'd like to thank all the parties who are trying to make this deal work. This is a big building. It's very visible on Wabash Avenue on 40. We all know the property, we've seen it all of our lives. It's been there longer than any of us have been alive. Figuring out a way to fix this building and bring it back into a current use, a good use, is a noble project, and I'm glad that the Sisters of Providence are involved. But I also want you to talk a little bit about why the Sisters of Providence are involved. They didn't run the mission. It's not a natural extension of where the property's been in the past. I wonder if you or someone on your team can speak to that.
Well, I won't pretend to speak for the sisters because they are much better at it speaking for themselves than I could ever be. I learned a little bit from them when I was a kid, but not everything I needed to know. I think first that they became acquainted with Flaherty and Collins because of some work that Flaherty and Collins is doing to attempt to do a renovation project of Owens Hall at St. Mary of the Woods. Owens Hall is the former, originally the novitiate for the Sisters of Providence, but then later became their primary office space for the Sisters of Providence. And they have since vacated that space, and that building is now empty, and they've worked with Flaherty and Collins on a similar project for elderly housing at St. Mary of the Woods on that campus. And they became acquainted with them through that. Flaherty and Collins came to the Miller Parrott building, and because of the work that they had done with the sisters there, assumed that it would be a project that would meet the mission of the Sisters of Providence, and the sisters concluded that it would as well. So they have decided to participate with them in doing that project.
It's great. I'm happy to support this and wish that we had this kind of creative partnership trying to save all of our significant historic buildings here in Terre Haute, especially the big ones like this.
I have to say, when the call came asking if I could assist with it, I was shocked because I thought that building would sit there for a very long time without anybody doing anything with it. I was very happily surprised.
Thanks. I yield.
Councilman Azar.
Just one question. It's for low to moderate income, is that correct?
Correct.
And what like what rents would it be, do you know?
Up to a maximum of 60% of median income.
It's based on their particular income and so much
Correct.
of it.
Yeah.
I agree with Councilman Nation. It's a good use of the building, and I'm happy to see that it's not gonna be tore down or sit there as an empty lot, so. Thank you, I yield.
Mr. President?
Councilwoman Crossen.
I just want to add to what both Councilman Azar and Councilman Nation said. I've worked with a number of people in that neighborhood. As you know, there have been a few issues over the last year or so in that neighborhood, and the fire kind of came on the back of those issues, and maybe exacerbated people's concerns about it, to have an empty building sitting there that could just become not only an eyesore, but maybe a building that would be vandalized and that sort of thing. So that neighborhood, I think, will celebrate this kind of renovation, and I see it as being, a catalyst to maybe that neighborhood stabilizing and coming back a little bit. So I, too, support this idea, and am really pleased that, as you were, Lou, that somebody saw that potential this early in its vacancy there. So I yield. Thank you.
We may be seeing the improvements in the core downtown creeping further and further east, which is
That's a good thing.
a good sign, yes.
Yeah, Lou, I had a couple questions. Seems like there's a few more hurdles you got to cross before this final's complete, correct?
Yeah, well, first I meant to mention earlier, we will be back at the final hearing, assuming that it's approved next week, to get the property rezoned. It's currently zoned M1, planned development, which I don't understand that. We'll be seeking an R3 planned development rezoning in order to permit the office space use. Except in the downtown area, you can't have the mixed uses, so we're doing an R3 planned development, and that will come before you in September.
Okay, so what if the tax credits don't come through at the state level? Will the project still move forward?
I doubt it.
Okay, so my question is, why are we doing requesting a tax abatement before those credits have been approved?
The credits get approved based on a point system, and one of the ways you can get points is by showing local public support. One of the ways you can show local public support is through abatements. Another one is by communities' commitment to improve infrastructure right around the, community investment, or through an abatement, which is a hard sign to the people scoring the project that there is local community support, because the local community has actually ponied up to support the project. They didn't just say, yeah, we support this, and sign something and send it along.
And I've been on the council, this is my first term. Do you know of any other residential properties that have received a tax abatement?
Offhand, no, but I know there have, I can't name it, but I'm certain there has been.
Mr. President?
Sure.
The previous council, they granted a tax abatement to the living facility north of Margaret off of First Street. That's not Honey Creek, what is that called? Arbor, Honey Creek Arbor or something? You know what I'm talking about? It's north of Margaret by like a block and a half.
Well, the reason why I asked is on our scoring system, it says it's not supposed to be for residential as one of the criteria on there. So I just wanted to let people know that we have done this in the past with residential. So, with regards to the wellness clinic and so forth, is that going to be for public use or just for the residents of the facility?
Primarily for the residents.
Residents of the facility, okay. And then,
I'm sorry.
It would be ideally open to the public.
Okay.
Any community space in the building other than the residential units would hopefully be public as well.
Okay. So I'm getting two different answers, so which one?
He's the one that's right.
Okay. So it will be for communities, okay, not just for the residents that live there, okay. Are you?
Just one other question. Is it, I mean, do we do an abatement before a rezoning?
This is just the first stage. So again, they'll be back, assuming this makes it through next week, they'll still have to come back the following month anyway to finalize it.
That's still
So-
for adoption and confirmation. right?
Correct. So essentially, what you would do is do we'll just put the rezoning just
Yeah,
before.
with the confirmation.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay, just want to make sure.
I do have one more. Regarding the historic preservation, I know you've shown us some schematics of other properties that, they've done, but do you have anything that's going to show what's going to be done with that building itself?
They don't have any renderings yet. Essentially, from the outside, what I was told was, at this point, the easiest thing to do would be show them a postcard from 1910, because that's pretty much what it's going to look like.
Okay. All right.
I'll go looking for one of those 1910s.
So $11 million is going to fix that building up?
$8 million?
Okay, all right.
8.9.
All right.
Mr. President, one more.
Councilman Nation.
Lou, when, oh, hey, look,
That's right.
he does have an old rendering.
This is the postcard. Only bigger than the postcard.
Do you remember Miller Park?
That's right. I think he only had one of those postcards in the back.
Used to love it.
One other question, Lou. When you were enumerating the different ways that a community can show support, you mentioned improving infrastructure serving the building or around the building. Typically, we've used tax increment finance district funds for downtown projects. This is just outside the eastern boundary of our downtown TIF district, like by a block or something like that. But, we're going to use those funds. We use those funds also to serve the district when we go beyond the boundaries. The question is, have you asked for or received any kind of commitment from our redevelopment commission to do sidewalks, curbs, trees, any of that stuff around the building?
I will confess ignorance on that subject.
It may be too early in the process to really start trying to nail those things down, but I would encourage you to. This will improve basically a block of Wabash Avenue. And again, in the past, what we've done, or one way that we've seen downtown TIF district funds spent when they're not being used to make payroll and when they're not being loaned to the city at zero interest and actually used for projects. This is the kind of project that they support. They go into infrastructure around these private investments, and it all results in not just a good project, but also good and improved public infrastructure around the project. So I would submit to you that this would be a great use of downtown TIF money, if there is any available. I yield.
One more.
Councilman Azar.
Sorry, one more. Are you going to use local labor as much as possible?
Yes, they've indicated that on the scoring matrix. We took the liberty of asking that the council award the extra points that are in the, we scored ourselves on that sheet, and that is one of the things that they gave themselves the extra points for.
Thank you.
Councilman Morris.
Lou, just in support of you and the sisters that are here, if you really want to get something done, bring Sister Dorothy. She is tougher than nails. It scares me, but I love her so much. So,
I think she was busy taking care of something
well,
on
she's
the other side.
She's tough. Love her. Peace. Thank you. I yield.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved that we adjourn by Councilman Azar, second by Councilman Morris. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Adjourned.